Thank you for joining the Center for Justice and Law Spotlight Conversation series, where we talk about topics on health justice and law with guests. I'm Nathan, and I'm here with my classmate Essence. We are students at Hamline University taking the course Health, Justice, and Law this semester, and our conversation today will be with Autumn Mason. Thank you for joining us, Autumn.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Well, we've asked you to join us today because of your experience in the prison system, your work to improve the justice system, and your training as a doula and training others to become one. And can you tell us more about your work you're doing for the community?
Sure, I love to. So when I introduce myself, I usually introduce myself with the title of I am an incarceration survivor, first and foremost. And I like to highlight that because, again, I like to note the term survivor. It was a very traumatic experience for myself, and so it actually pivoted my career. At this time, I am studying to become a doula. I'm working with the Minnesota Prison Doula Project in many aspects. I am a program facilitator, a peer support professional, a trauma recovery coach, and a re-entry coach, as well as a public speaker and a social change agent. And so, in broader words, more language, all I do is I use my mess and my experience as a message to help advocate to create some of the changes that I feel are necessary in the justice system. Does that answer your question?
Didn't realize I was muted. Sorry. And that's awesome description and a bio of like what you do. We would like to ask some questions if that's okay with you, just to kind of get to know you better. First question that I have, kind of with the countless cases of mistreatment of Black women with child delivery in regular hospitals, how can you kind of speak from not only your experience, but like any other experiences you know of treatment in prison when having contractions/pain?
Yeah, so I was incarcerated at Shakopee facility. I was admitted into the prison when I was 7.5 months pregnant. At that point in my pregnancy, it was my third pregnancy, and I had experience at birthing before, as well as with the support of a doula before. But obviously in this situation, it was a lot different. It was definitely terrifying. And I actually tried to use words to elaborate how it feels as a mother, a life giver, a caregiver, and to not have the right to give the care in the way that you would normally do so. Not only that, but the healthcare system within the Shakopee prison was, and for lack of better words, a joke. I practically didn't receive any medical care from the Shakopee prison during my pregnancy. I was at the point where, so at 32 weeks, when I came into the prison, 32 and a half weeks, I did get the normal intake assessment. And during that assessment, they just do the routine check. And I was told that I would see an OB doctor within the next week. When I was admitted into the prison after that initial intake screening, I let a week go by, no response. Let 2 weeks go by, no response. So I started sending what is their communication system, which is called a kite. Sending kite messages to the medical staff requesting. So upon request and a $5 copay, you usually and generally are called into the medical office at their convenience or at their availability, and not with much pre-notice for yourself. However, I kited for several weeks and still had not gotten any medical treatment. By the time I was 36.5 weeks, I was then taken off grounds to the prison or to the hospital. So that's when I initially started to get the medical care that I needed. For those 4.5, almost 5 weeks, I did get called into medical care one time. That time I was called in to see a general practitioner and not an OB doctor, because I told them that I was having pains. When I was brought in, she did an overall physical exam. Started talking to me about my medical history. And in that conversation, I realized that she was talking about someone completely different as she started to bring up medical history and medical interactions and medications that I had not had experience. So before being taken to St. Francis Medical System or Center for my actual weekly OB visits, because at that point, 36 weeks, you're taken off around once a week to have that OB visit until delivery. Prior to that, the 5 weeks I was there, I did not get any care other than being called in with the wrong chart.
Wow. That's a lot. That's definitely kind of heartbreaking even, because well, it is. And I'd like to come back to that because that does relate to another one of our questions. And I think you'd have more to say on that. But the next question I'll ask you is, how does your work connect to our theme this year of health justice and law, which again, but the next one you'll like even better.
Okay. Well, I first want to say that I appreciate that this is what you guys' focus is this year. I think that by having these topics, by having these conversations, this is how change is initiated. So, and as you guys are the students and leaders of our future, I am excited to know that this is something that you guys are interested in, first of all. But yes, my work directly connects with it because, again, I'm using my mess as a message. And in my experience of being involved with the justice system tends to work two different ways. It works on the surface level, and it works in the reality. So, and I say that to say this, there are plenty of policies and procedures that are outline that would preserve life, that would preserve dignity for those incarcerated, that are not practiced on a regular basis. And until our community and until our legislature is made aware, because in a lot of cases, it's not that they're not being attentive or caring, it's that these things happen under the microscope. They don't know and see what's going on in these facilities. To be honest with you, I, in my work now, have been able to identify so many lapses of communication between the actual wardens and the staff facilitating the prisons and the DOC commission and their office in general. So in my work, I would like to bridge the gap. I would like to bridge the gap between how people are being treated and how people should be treated. I would also like to, like I said, change the language and change the narrative so that our community and the people that are, make up our society are more understanding to the trends of female incarceration, the particular stigmas and the challenges that these women face, and the fact that most women that are incarcerated are trauma victims themselves, and they have never been acknowledged for having the traumas that they have. So when you continue to have re-traumatization or re-traumatizing experiences, it's very hard to be of a normal expected person, in society. And so really my goal is to try to help mend the healing process that has that the justice system has, the trauma that the justice system has implied on these people, incarcerated people and justice involved people, and our families and our communities, because the women and the mothers and the caregivers who are being incarcerated, they have families, who have communities, who have many loved ones that are also affected by this. And so this should be looked at as a community issue and not just as an individual issue. And I'm trying to do my best to change that and change that narrative.
Thank you so much for that answer. I think that completely answered the question on all front ends. Kind of just to transition from that, how can we kind of support and elevate the work you do as students and just as like youth?
Well, you know what, Nathan? You guys you're doing it. You're starting the work. Okay. I'll be honest. I struggle with that answer because I have so much faith that things will change, but I don't expect, honestly, to see the changes that the thorough changes that we need in my lifetime. So with that being said, I feel like I'm investing in doing the groundwork, but you all and the generations to come are going to really be the ones who push this change, because the world is changing. Many things are evolving, but this system is a system of the old mindset, of the old times, of the older generations, and they're not as receptive. They're not as understanding, and they're not as compassionate as I believe that this new generation is. So I do honestly and full-heartedly feel like you guys are doing the work by us continuing to have these conversations, by us continuing to support the reentry process for people who are coming back into our communities. This is the way that we are going to heal and be able to change the system.
Before we ask our next question, my question I have, and I know this one is a little bit broad, but what parts, and I know not what parts, but oh, that scared me.
Oh, I didn't even notice it. Thank you.
What like what how do you feel like generational trauma comes in? Where do you like, and I know it comes in everywhere and all around, but I want you to just talk about that and the connection between the prison system and especially Black females in the prison system.
Yes. So I'm going to try to keep this in a nutshell without going off into a tangent, because this is something that I have really spent a lot of interest and time and focus on. In my opinion, and from what I see, intergenerational trauma has led us to be at this point of our society, this point of devastation, degradation, biasm, racism, classism, sexism. Our traumas, in my opinion, over the generations that have gone unhealed, unaddressed, have caused us to live in a sense of fight or flight, should I say. I don't feel that. I feel it's caused so much of a disruption in so many different communities, but I'll speak on my community as a Black woman and from the Black community particularly. So the prison system, in my opinion, is a reincarnate or a elevation of the system of slavery. Okay. And it has been imposed as a way to keep many people, particularly my people, oppressed. And systemically, I believe almost all of the laws, all of the practices, and all of the mindsets and of the people are embedded with this type of trauma. Okay. And until we can honestly not just acknowledge that there's trauma, but to start to do the groundwork to heal the trauma, and that healing, again, will take some time. It will take many generations, to be honest, in my opinion, because it's taken generations of trauma to get us to this point. But there is hope. And the reason I say that is because you can't get healthy until you realize that you're sick. And I feel like our society has been hiding the fact that it's sick and trying to live as if we're fine. And now we're getting to the point that our bodies and our society as a body cannot take it anymore. So I really hope that, and I know this is kind of going off into a tangent because I will, but I really hope that with these ongoing upcoming generations, and like I said, the shift in the mindset of the culture, we're at a time that people are starting to treat people, or starting to want to treat people the way that they want to be treated. Okay. And that is the most basic of basic rules of humanity. I think that once, if we continue to go in this direction, if we continue to push for social justice, social justice and social change in the manner of everyone should be treated equally, regardless. I know we have invested much of our energy into conversations about what has happened to our people, and I appreciate that. But I'm at a point of being proactive now and looking forward and looking ahead. So in that aspect, I think the conversation does still need to shift to where are we headed, and not so much of what has happened to us, but that's later on in the healing process, if you understand what I'm saying. So it's a very loaded question, but like I said, there's much potential. There's much potential. It's just it's a time of shifting the mindset. So
That was a really good answer. Like really good answer. I guess the question I kind of have, and this is also a little bit of a broad question, but I kind of like, especially from the reading that we just had this past week, I kind of noticed that there is definitely a cycle with individuals hitting rock bottom to the point where they see prison as like a safe haven. But in reality, when let out to the real world, they're kind of put in an even worse position because they have felonies, because they have a lot of things that are like strapped to them at that point. Would you agree to that? And could you kind of speak more on that?
Nathan, thank you for bringing that up, because in my experience, being in prison was the easy part. Coming back into the community, trying to regain not just my life for myself, but for my children, regain stability, regain some sense of dignity. That was the hard part. And not only was it hard because the community and our society is relentlessly unforgiving in so many ways, it was hard because there wasn't many outlets or avenues for me to seek support. Okay. So it's one thing to read about these experiences. It's one thing to witness a loved one or someone that you care about go through these experiences, but to physically, and I say that because I have been the daughter of an incarcerated parent. I have been the niece of an incarcerated relative. I have had these experiences from the outside looking in before I had become an incarcerated person. It is so much harder to come back into society, to have the pressure in the because the parole system is not equipped to support you to succeed. It's actually posed as it's waiting for you to fail. Okay. The approach that you get is I am going to report when you fail, because I have little faith that you're going to succeed. And coming into an environment where you have so much pressure, social pressure, personal pressure, family, you have these, and particularly for women, because majority of the women who are incarcerated are primary caregivers. They were of custody of their children at the time of their incarceration. So we also have to reassume that responsibility once we come home. We have to do that as well as get a job, as well as comply with parole, as well as stay law abiding. And then and that's just on the surface. But internally, you have to do that and be okay. And it's hard to be okay or to pretend that you're okay when you can hardly verbalize the ways that you're not okay. And let me just elaborate that you guys so that you can understand. I've been in St. Paul my entire life. I've grown up not far from where you guys go to school, right here by Central High School in St. Paul. Okay. I am a St. Pauli girl. When I went to Shakopee in April of 2014, and to be honest, we're almost at the date that I was convicted. So it's very inspiring to have this conversation with you guys at this time of the year, because it's an emotional time of year for me. But when I went to prison in April 2014, the city had just approved the Green Line. They were just talking about it, okay? I want to just kind of give you an understanding of how things affect you internally without you being able to express it. When I first got home in May of 2016, I was going to the Midway to do some shopping for my necessities. I had a family member come pick me up from the halfway house. It was right off of Dale and Larpenteur, and that is still within the city limits. So I felt like I felt like things were familiar when I was over there. When I got to university, I experienced my first panic attack. And the reason I figured, I later on, I reflect on this, the reason I feel like I had that is because there were so many different sights that had changed visually, so many sounds. I was not used to the sound of a train coming up and down University. I was not used to these sights, the noises of the bells and all of that. My body, my mind couldn't even absorb at once. And I had my first panic attack. And I had to silently struggle through that panic attack for two reasons. One, because I couldn't even verbalize it. But two, being in prison taught me that my needs, my feelings, the things that are affecting me wasn't important. So I can't tell anybody. So it is a very emotionally, it is a very hard and difficult experience re-entering, and a lot of people can't even start to conceive in all the ways that it is. And so the reason that I share that story with many people is because I want people to understand people who are experiencing reintegration and re-entry are going through an awful lot, and the amount of pressure is enough to push anyone who has struggled with sobriety, struggled with mental health. It is enough to push them back into that type of place. And so that's why for me, support within the reentry process is so pivotal, because that is more than likely the reason why people recidivate. People do not recidivate because they want to go back to jail. People recidivate because they buckle under the pressure and they return to their own habits, old habits that are familiar and in some ways comforting. So it's a lot.
Just looking at time here, I will ask you this other question that I believe you'll have a lot to say, but your panic attack definitely reminded me a lot of what my immigrant mother said she experienced when she first came to New York City. And I can definitely imagine all those sounds and how it would feel if I didn't. Um, so our question here is, how does your work connect to our spring theme of reproductive justice? And I think this would be very easy.
Yeah, so when you guys pose a question, what does reproductive justice mean to you? I wanted to kind of elaborate on that because in most people's definition, it surrounds the topic of abortion and having the right to bear or end life in your own right. However, for me, it also includes having the right. Okay, so reproductive justice represents having the natural, undisrupted right to bear life, give life, and sustain life without the unwarranted influence of the government. And the reason I say that is because for me, my reproductive rights were violated when I was not allowed to breastfeed my daughter, when I was not allowed to bond with my daughter. Socially and culturally, these are things that are very important to my people. And I understand that I was convicted because of my actions to commit to that time. However, my child has suffered in ways that I have not and continues to suffer. And I believe that her reproductive rights were violated as well. And so again, I would like to stress the term to sustain life without the unwarranted influence of the government. To me, that is what reproductive justice is. And the reason why my work is a direct influence or impact of reproductive justice is because there are many women who are struggling with getting any type of sustainable health or medical treatment within the prisons, who are suffering silently within the prison system. And once you are committed to the prison system, we are of their responsibility. And so if they are lacking or they are failing to meet their responsibility, I feel the justice system needs to take that under consideration and fight for our rights just as well. So I use my time, my energy, and my work to fight for those who cannot speak for themselves. And again, I'm working as a doula. I'm training as a doula to support the women who are incarcerated or who are justice impacted, who have these additional layers of stress and trauma in their lives, to try to help them sustain life of their children in the most natural way, in the healthiest way. So that's how I connect my work. And thank you, Essence, for sharing that about your mother's experience, because I can definitely just begin to imagine that would cause a lot of triggers for me as well.
And just before we go, kind of what's your quick call to action for our audience?
My call to action is changing the narrative, okay? Justice involved people, justice impacted women, justice impacted caregivers are people too. And in most cases, they have women particularly, I should say, the trends and statistics show most incarcerated women are nonviolent offenders. Most incarcerated women are victims of trauma themselves, and most incarcerated women who are convicted of a act of violence has been found in some way, in most cases, I should say, and I don't know the exact percentage, but in most cases to have been the victim has been their oppressor or their abuser in some form. So I just want to say that we have this idea in society that all criminals are violent, malicious, and are a threat to our community. In most cases for women, these women are convicted of survival related crimes, and it's very understood. Most people don't understand what represents female criminality. I feel like by us having these conversations, us kind of putting a picture and a face to what a justice impacted woman and a justice impacted family looks like, we will begin to start wanting to help and support them, because it's only going to help and support our communities in return. There are so many children in the St. Paul Public School District particularly who have experienced parental incarceration. And if we know anything, we know that parental incarceration is one of the ACEs experiences. So one of the adverse childhood experiences that impacts the overall outcome of their life. If we can just stop for one moment and think about the children and the families and the communities that are involved by more than likely nonviolent crimes, then I think that will kind of change the idea and the perception that it's more about rehabilitation, it's more about recovery, and it's more about skill building and providing that support to sustain that family, so that the mothers or the caregivers are not recidivating, are not repopulating into the criminal justice system, but instead they're reinvesting their interests and their energies into building the community. And trust me, most of us women only die to have that opportunity. So I really, again, think that the focus and my call to action is to be the face, to represent the people who can't represent themselves, and to help to shift this mindset of our community and our society and change the narrative, because justice impacted people just want to be people.
That wonderful answer, and that's a great call to action. Thank you so much for speaking to us today, Autumn, and I had a great time listening to you. All right, everyone, be sure to follow our Instagram and Facebook, and our next spotlight will be next Thursday, April 15th, with Dr. Abula Abu Akbar. Bakr, sorry about that. And she'll be speaking about her work as a doula as well. So, all right, everyone, have a great day then.